Hey, long time no see again. There are a few reasons this video took so long to make, but I think it's appropriate to only talk about one of them, and that is that I was processing the passing of one of the oldest friends I made in the Xeno community. While you're most likely to recognize Miel Kari or Kari Hana as an artist, even if the only time you've heard that name before was reading it in the patron scroll at the beginning of one of my videos, I promise you have a lot to thank her for. In addition to having been my friend since really before I started doing content in the way I do now, and our conversations led to at least a dozen videos I can think of off the top of my head that she might as well have co-written, because she was just as thorough as I am at covering every single angle of a situation, and one of the most knowledgeable people on Xeno as a whole, both in-universe and without, that I've ever met. As for her own projects outside of art, which was both original and fan works largely for the Xeno series, she was a data miner, a translator, and made some visual guides. Like, if you've seen a picture explaining the meanings of all the Minato kanji, or that flowchart that detailed every piece of official Xeno media pre-Xenoblade 3, those were both her. Even if you don't watch my videos much, or you hadn't seen her art, I promise you she has contributed to your enjoyment of the Xeno series in at least a small way. Every single day lately I've been seeing new people, some who are fairly prominent figures in the Xeno community that I wasn't even aware she was acquainted with, express their sadness for her passing, and that's the same here. I will be maintaining my usual tone through the rest of this video, but I'm not gonna lie and say it hasn't been hard doing that when it's still tinged with the knowledge that if things were better, Miel and I would have probably already figured out exactly what this project is, and, well, that she won't be around to see it whenever it does come to fruition, and that just really sucks. For the time being, I'm not going to be doing anything big specifically in her memory, though I'm 100% going to permanently leave her name in the scroll of supporters at the beginning of all my videos, because she has absolutely done enough for me over the years to just perpetually have the title of supporter for as long as I'm calling myself Luxon. But in the future, I do have one major project in mind, one that was very heavily influenced by the last big conversation I had about Xenolore with her, and that one is going to be dedicated to her and her memory in its entirety, and you will 100% know what that is when you see it. As for now, though, I think it would be disrespectful to one of the most passionate Xeno fans I've ever known to not overanalyze a new Monolith announcement, so the show will go on. This video will contain spoilers for the entire numbered Xenoblade Chronicles series. On August 4th, Monolithsoft posted a new announcement that they are recruiting new staff, and this on its own would be an extremely mundane thing. They make public recruitment announcements fairly regularly, at least every couple of years, so just that happening isn't too big of a surprise. In the past, they've done general recruitment, and those people ended up everywhere in the company working on various different games Monolith touches. They did specifically ask for people for Xenoblade in the past, and that ended up being Xenoblade Definitive Edition and then Xenoblade 3, and back in 2017, they posted an announcement that they were recruiting for some sort of fantasy action game, specifically looking for people who have experience with enemy AI, Western gaming trends, and just generally hinting that they were making some kind of fantasy action game or action RPG, while showing off concept art that did not match Xenoblade or any IP they've worked on before or since. This had people theorizing back in the day, and people are still believing that this game's going to come out eventually, that Monolith was working on some kind of new medieval fantasy IP with an aesthetic derived from this concept art. That was never the case. If you paid any attention to the three images they showed, they are three different characters in three different art styles with three completely different tones. These were things that at most Monolith concept artists made to pitch to Nintendo, something that was eventually turned down because we also have reports from around that time that Xenoblade projects were the only thing Nintendo was greenlighting from Monolithsoft. Time has gone to show that this medieval action game was almost certainly just Tears of the Kingdom, as we obviously know plenty of Monolithsoft staff worked on that game, and they even posted a second recruitment specifically saying it was recruiting for a new Zelda game like a month before the first Tears of the Kingdom teaser dropped. The other really significant recruitment post from around that time was October 2018, where they used concept art of the Mechanis to say that they were hiring for some new RPG, and it turned out that ended up being Xenoblade Definitive Edition, and then that staff who'd gotten onboarded with that game also worked on Xenoblade 3. So that's all well and good, but why are people so hyped about this specific recruitment drive? Well, unlike all the others, this one specifically says that they are recruiting staff for a new RPG directed by Xenoblade creator and co-creator of the Xeno series as a whole, Tetsuya Takahashi. And it even includes detailed information of the roles they're looking for and a message from Takahashi himself. This seems like major news, and people are clamoring, oh, they're doing a new IP this time, surely. I'm gonna have to put a damper on that. This is almost certainly Xeno something, and I am gonna go through the entire post and explain everything about it and why I believe that to be the case. I will be using translations publicly provided by Files from the Zohar at Daily Xeno Series on Twitter. Link will be in the description as always. I also want you to temper your expectations and remember that they are recruiting for this. This means it probably has only recently entered full production, which means it's not going to be coming out next year or whatever. Based on precedence, I would estimate that this game will be coming out in 2026 or 2027, assuming they're able to recruit the people they're looking for and there's no other hiccups in development. That does not necessarily mean we're not going to see a new game from Monolithsoft or even the Monolithsoft division headed by Takahashi before then. It just means that it's not going to be this one. This is most likely Monolith's second Switch 2 game and not their first one. Speaking of new hardware, the times changing is one of the first things Takahashi mentions in his message. He notes that this is the first time in a while they've hired for their main production staff, which, yeah, that is correct. As far as we can tell, the last time they hired specifically for this team was in 2018, and they've only been picking up people from outside of major recruitment drives in between starting work in earnest on Definitive Edition and whatever the hell they've been doing since Future Redeemed and Tears of the Kingdom wrapped before starting work on this game that they're recruiting for now. He then goes on to make several additional points. This new RPG will be taking on challenges not seen in other Monolith titles. This is why they need new hands. As industry standards change, Monolith can no longer remain as small as it once was, and he notes that it is no longer effective to rely on raw manpower, that workplaces today require much more efficiency than that. This is basically an indication that the times are changing and the paradigm has shifted. So in order to stay on the cutting edge of game development and retain their high standards of quality, Monolith 2 needs to change with the times and recruit more people and people with more specific skills in order to make the kind of games that meet the standards of the gamer of the present day. This hints at a few things. The first is that the generational jump to the Switch 2 is actually going to be significant enough where they need to change their workflow in order to accommodate making assets for a game that will run on a much more powerful system. If you look back at their catalog, you'll notice that Monolith has basically zero experience with actually powerful hardware. They use and abuse the hell out of the technology they have, but they've never actually gotten a whole lot of power to play with. Most people agree that the largest single technical leap in between two console generations was going from the PS1 and N64 to the Dreamcast, PS2, GameCube, and original Xbox. And Monolithsoft formed after that jump already occurred. Their first game was a PS2 game, and they developed for the PS2 and GameCube, but then they were bought out by Nintendo. They exclusively started developing games then for handhelds and the Wii, which is two GameCubes strapped together. Then they started developing for the Wii U and handhelds, the Wii U being two Wii's strapped together. And then, in 2017, the Nintendo Switch came out and they worked on Breath of the Wild and Xenoblade 2, making the most powerful system they've ever touched, something in between a PS3 and a PS4. And they made the Xenoblade and open world Zelda series. If any of the hardware capability rumors of the Switch 2 are to be believed, this is the biggest hardware leap Monolithsoft as a developer has ever dealt with, so poaching people from studios who've already worked on things more powerful than the Switch probably makes a lot of sense right about now. Takahashi also seems to be implying that whatever this new project is, it is relatively ambitious. And this is by Monolithsoft standards, so yeah, get more people to work on that. I think it's a good thing to leave the days of, we got 60 people after those guys left for Breath of the Wild, let's just bang out Xenoblade 2 in an extra 8 months, behind us. Takahashi specifically says that they've been producing games with a small number of people compared to the scale of the titles they make. Not only do they make games with large worlds, but they have a lot of content within them. So, as technical demands and expectations of fans, as well as just the ambition and passion of the people working on the games improve, you're going to need more people to be able to keep that up. That's not to say Monolith as a whole, as a company, needs to modernize in any way. They and Nintendo as a whole have been fairly progressive on the grounds of like workers' rights and providing a good working environment for people and social issues that might prevent someone from being able to do their best job. And Monolith specifically got rid of crunch in the early 2000s before they were even bought by Nintendo, and implemented a very robust work from home system during the pandemic that still carries on today. At least half of projects Nintendo had in active development in early 2020 were delayed by like a year. Monolithsoft just kept making Xenoblade 3. That was their COVID game, and they pushed the release date up because Splatoon was still taking too long. Anyway, that's not what Takahashi's talking about. He's more talking about the workflow and their general development pipeline. Because, and I'm just going to read this from a machine translation as Files from the Zohar only did bullet points, and this covers a few things that were not mentioned there. He says, in order to meet the ever-increasing demands of our customers, it is important to have a wide range of knowledge and horizontal connections that utilize that knowledge. In the role-playing game genre, each specification, such as the field, battle, characters, quests, and story, is closely linked. To be honest, it's difficult to create each part independently, especially in the case of open-world type works, which have become commonplace these days. Of course, it's not impossible to create the game that way, but if there's no horizontal cooperation, it'll be immediately obvious to customers who play the game, and that is not our intention. Takahashi is a better man than I because, well, he still assumes gamers are smart, and are going to be able to tell if all the teams aren't working together in synergy. What he appears to be getting at here is that all of the different disparate teams have to come together and provide different parts to a whole of a game, but it is difficult, if those teams are not cooperating properly, to make a final product that is greater than the sum of its parts. So as the development style changes, as the development demands change, as the fan demands change, and as the amount of people working on the projects change, all of those ways of the teams working together and cooperating with each other also need to change with the times. So they want to recruit people who are passionate for this kind of cooperation and for Monolithsoft's style of development and their games, as well as people who have experience working in this kind of environment already. It is also extremely worth noting that Takahashi goes out of his way to highlight open world type RPGs, heavily suggesting that since all of this cooperation is very important to that kind of game, the next thing they're making, or maybe even the thing they are recruiting for right now, is going to be one of them. Obviously, this has no bearing on anything if this game is a new IP, like some people are thinking it is, but unfortunately we can't say, oh yes, this is definitely Xenoblade X if it is some form of Xenoblade either. And that is simply because the distinction Monolith and Nintendo make for what counts as an open world game might not agree with your own personal distinction, or even what appears to me to be the general regarded consensus of the Western fanbase. Monolith does consider all of the Xenoblade games to be open world type games, while I think most people watching this video whose first language is English would say no, X is a true open world game, while the other games are linear, large worlds that draw influence from other open world titles. That's not what they're saying here. This could be a numbered Xenoblade style game, this could be an X style game, this could be a new IP in either style, just based on this. Takahashi ends his message by apologizing for speaking so formally, as Monolith's lead production team is usually a much more relaxed, rough around the edges team. And this is something that definitely comes across in a lot of interviews with him and other senior staff members on the Xenoblade series. At the end, he welcomes anyone to help build the new Monolithsoft and to make a new game there. Obviously, this is partially PR speak. I'm pretty sure, I can't reasonably apply to work at Monolithsoft there. I would have to have, actual game development skills and be able to speak Japanese, but he's saying that anyone who meets their requirements is welcome to apply. Being a Monolithsoft fan and having relevant experience in similar genres or types of development environments is encouraged, but if you want to make good video games with a good company to make good video games at, you can apply to work there. While the recruitment post says Monolith is looking for people for basically every possible category of game development, it does narrow down to 8 specific important categories. They are 2D designer, artwork staff, leader class. This appears to be a lead character designer position, which is interesting because In previous artist recruitment posts, they've been looking for someone like that for the Xenoblade series, stating that they want it to have a distinct iconic look similar to Tetsuya Nomura's art style for that whole era of Final Fantasy. It seems like they are not intending to go with Masatsugu Saito's art as the lead character designs and key art in the long term. They had him for Xenoblade 2, and I believe they posted something similar in an artist recruitment drive in between 2 and 3, where they were looking for a lead character designer for Xenoblade, only to end up with Saito again for 3, so it's possible that they just had not been able to find the distinctive style that would make what they want to do with Xenoblade possible in between then. My personal theory is that they're looking for some kind of art style to replace the iconic one of Kunihiko Tanaka, who designed characters for Xenogears, Xenosaga 1, and Xenoblade X, as while Saito's is also a clearly distinctive and recognizable style, it is also significantly more generic, and one of its key characteristics is being fairly same-facey, so it seems like they're trying to go for a unique, iconic style like Tanaka's, and just were not able to find that in between 2 and 3, so they're looking for it again for this project. Either that or this isn't a Xenoblade game, so they need a new character designer to define a new art style for a new IP. That is also possible, I guess. Next are 3D CG designers for character and map design. This is 3D modelers making actual assets both for characters and for environments and objects. Development environment engineer. This tracks a lot with everything they've been talking about. Field level designer. Map design in Monolith games good. If make bigger Monolith game, they need more map designers. This makes sense. Assistant director, which is really surprising because I very recently talked about everyone who's directed a Xenoblade game and how there are people who seem to be capable of being raised to a proper director position, so maybe the fact is they're going to be working on multiple projects at once. So all their current directors and assistant directors will be occupied on higher level director positions, so they need more assistant directors. That in and of itself is pretty exciting in all honesty. The last two things they're looking for are in-game animators and effect designers. Now, this could be interpreted as Monolith ending their partnership with Studio Graphinica, the anime studio that did the animation for cutscenes for literally every Xenoblade game, but that seems unlikely. It's almost certain they're looking for effect designers and animators and just general animators for gameplay purposes, like battle animations. They've been reusing art animations since Xenoblade X. They need people to make more of those. And running animations for new characters because like half the characters in 3 reuse ones from 2. Stuff like that. And yeah, Monolith's recruiting. That's what they're recruiting for. What is this project going to be? Is it a new IP? Is it Xenoblade X2? Is it Xenoblade 4? It's going to be a new Xenoblade game. I'm sorry for people who keep thinking it's a new IP, but just because they called it a new RPG does not mean that it has to not be Xenoblade. The 2018 recruitment announcement did not say it was a new Xenoblade game, but heavily hinted that it would be one, and what other open world style RPG would Tetsuya Takahashi be making in 2024? I do think it's a little worth pointing out the ambiguity in past recruitment drives. In 2017, they said they were recruiting for an action game. In 2019, a month after they said they were recruiting for Zelda, a Zelda game was announced. In 2018, they said they were recruiting for a new RPG. People were trying to spin it as if it was going to be a new IP, and they just used Art of Mechanis because they didn't want to spoil anything. And then in 2019, they announced Xenoblade Definitive Edition, which released in 2020. It's gonna be the same case as this again. They can't specify they're recruiting for Xenoblade or Xeno whatever because they're not close to being able to announce whatever this project they're recruiting for currently is. Also, adding on to all the stuff I've been talking about, I just remembered that Monolith did a specific recruitment drive in like 2013, I think it was, with this piece of concept art, and even back in the day that had people wildly guessing about some sort of new fantasy IP or whatever, when this might have been like a concept that was turned into Celica and Rock from Xenoblade X, or the fantasy trappings were just because they were actually getting people for Breath of the Wild even back then. It's the same thing every time. And then finally, it's Takahashi himself. Is he really going to make a non-Xeno game after everything that happened in Xenoblade 3 and Future Redeemed? His message to fans when 3 came out was saying that you will be able to tell where the series is going after the end of 3 and Future Redeemed. Then, Future Redeemed included all of that stuff and all of the hints at the future, all of the references to other games. And then, other information about that said, yes, I would like to make another Xenoblade game. And then the art book was like, yes, there are answers to some of the things, but I can't tell you them right now because they will spoil the next game. He knows exactly what the next game is going to be. Why would he make something other than that unless he was literally ordered to by Nintendo? And would Nintendo really tell the executive director of Xenoblade to stop making Xenoblade when the series has been doing this well for them lately? I think that there is maybe a chance that they will be allowed to change the title to Xeno something else, purely because I think Xeno on its own might be considered iconic enough where you would be able to get away with changing it to Xeno something and then indicating it's a new story arc based off of that. Maybe. This is very, very maybe. In fact, if it's a Xenoblade X continuation or sequel or remake or remaster, whatever, then it being given a new name then actually does kind of make sense. Because all fandom tends to distinguish the trilogy from X, and that makes sense largely because of the gameplay style and not even because of any story-specific things. And the way Japanese fans do that is they refer to the numbered trilogy as Xenoblade, obviously an abbreviation of Xenoblade, or how it's written in katakana. To abbreviate Xenoblade X, it's Xenokuro, or Xeno and then the beginning of cross, because it's not Xenoblade Chronicles X in Japanese, it is Xenoblade Kurosu, because they pronounce the letter X cross sometimes. So if they want to just officially rename X to Xenocross, then have it as a series running in parallel, that I think they could get away with. Coming up with a fourth Xenoblade suffix, they could maybe get away with that. I don't really know if they would be allowed to call something non-Xenoblade, especially since, like, even after Xenoblade 2 came out and was wildly successful, Takahashi was on record saying that out of like 10 proposals, the only proposal that Nintendo accepted was one for a new Xenoblade thing. And like, who even knows? If Xenoblade Definitive Edition was their first proposal for the game that ended up being Xenoblade Definitive Edition, what if they proposed X and that got shot down because Nintendo wanted them to just do some other numbered Xenoblade to connect things back to 2? What if they proposed a new IP where they could have said, from the makers of Xenoblade, but Nintendo was like, no, just make more Xenoblade. And then they had to make 2 more Xenoblades, and then Takahashi wants to make even more Xenoblade after that. I don't think Takahashi would willingly work on something non-Xeno right now. And I don't think Nintendo would let him. If this was just a new RPG, period, they didn't show off any Xeno concept art here, really. So that would be fairly reasonable to assume, okay, new RPG, they're changing up their style, they're talking about open world things, they're talking about more action stuff, they've kind of been subtly recruiting people who have online knowledge and capabilities for a while now. I could see that being a new IP. It's because they said it is Takahashi that there is no way this is going to be a new IP. I went through and looked through every game Takahashi worked on. Now, he has special thanks credits on a lot of Monolith games, but the last non-Xeno game he had a major role on was Somabringer. That was an original Nintendo DS game, and that was very much the proto-Xenoblade 2. Somabringer came out in 2008, 2 years after Xenosaga Episode 3, and 2 years before Xenoblade 1, so he actually did have a bit of gap in his bibliography to actually put significant work in on something else. What was the last non-Xeno game he worked on before that? Chrono Trigger. The Super Nintendo version. From 1995. Takahashi has been one-tricking the Xeno series for longer than I have been alive. I cannot see him stopping now after how Xenoblade 3 and Future Redeemed ended. So, okay, yeah, this new project is almost certainly some new Xenoblade thing, be it 4, be it X2, or a new Xeno title entirely. What's Monolith doing in between now and then? They've released a Xenoblade game every couple years since 2017, and they're on track to be releasing one in 2025 as well, 2 years after Future Redeemed, which also would be the launch year of the Switch 2. And seeing how absurdly well Xenoblade 2 did in the Switch 1's launch holiday season, they're probably going to want to do a repeat of that. So what's coming out then? Well, unironically, it's more likely to be a new IP there than anything else. Maybe Nintendo tapped Monolith to revive some other old IP of theirs. I would love to see a Monolithsoft interpretation of Star Tropics or the Mysterious Murasame Castle. Both of those would be amazing. You know I'm right. Don't debate me on this. I'm 100% correct as always. And this upcoming thing is significantly more likely to be a Xenoblade X remaster than the thing they're recruiting for now. And that is because if there's going to be any Xenoblade X related content in the brand new RPG Takahashi's directing, they're going to need to re-release X at some point. Like, 500,000 people bought Xenoblade X. 6 times that bought Xenoblade 2. If they're trying to get people who liked Xenoblade 2 and 3 to play Xenoblade 4, which has important content and context from Xenoblade X, you're going to make them play Xenoblade X. That's just how that works. So, if the new game is Xenoblade 4 with new X content added, if it's Xenoblade X2, then the 2025 game has to be X. If it's not one of those two things, then it could be anything else, and obviously I'm going to say Xenosaga, but a new IP or another legacy Nintendo thing is honestly relatively likely as well. But whatever it is, I'm excited to see it, and I knew you are too. Thank you for coming with me for more wild over-analysis of everything. I'm hopefully going to be able to upload a few more videos soon. I've got a lot of ideas that I had unable to work on for a while that was getting just further pushed back by the fact that I needed to make this news video about this recruitment drive as well. And yeah, I don't know. I'll see you next time. Until then, this is Luxon, signing off.